to bend to Moscow's demands and others urging resistance. What's the latest?
Well, EU countries remain very split on this prospect. The EU has called it blackmail and said that European countries shouldn't bend to those demands, that they shouldn't give in to the blackmail. But the other alternative is very unpalatable for a lot of European countries: to lose access to Russian gas, to face the prospect of rationing for industry, for consumers. That is something that could be politically very unpopular in a time where economic growth is already slowing, inflation is already surging. So basically what we're seeing right now is most EU countries that are still very dependent on Russian gas start to prepare to pay in rubles. So Bloomberg News has reported that about 10 EU companies have set up Russian ruble accounts with Gazprom Bank in Russia. That's what Putin has demanded. About 4 companies have already paid in rubles. I think we're going to see more clearly how this plays out at the end of next month. That's when the majority of these payments are going to be due to Russia for their natural gas. But so far, it does appear that a lot of EU countries would end up paying for Russian natural gas in rubles rather than have their supply cut off.
Yeah, so further to that, the EU previously said paying for gas in rubles would violate the bloc's sanctions. Has it moved on that?
It has not, and that adds another layer of uncertainty, and that definitely raises the stakes for a lot of these countries that are facing the prospect of having their gas cut off or to face sanctions from the EU. Basically, what the EU has said is that if you're an EU company, you can't pay in rubles. That is a violation of their current sanctions against Russia, because those sanctions prohibit EU banks, EU buyers from dealing in rubles through the Russian central bank. What we've heard from experts and also from a lot of companies is actually quite a bit different. They think that there is a workaround, that there is a way to pay in euros. So essentially what a lot of companies and what a lot of sanctions experts have proposed is that companies would open these 2 bank accounts in Russia, and they would pay in euros, and then that money would be converted into rubles without them having to do it themselves. So technically, EU companies would still be paying in euros, but the end result would be rubles for Russia, which is what they want. It's really unclear whether that is a violation of EU sanctions and whether Russia would accept that payment. So EU energy ministers are expected to meet next week. They're expected to discuss this potential workaround. The EU is also being pressed to give a more clear line, a more clear response to whether that would be a violation of sanctions. If it is a violation of sanctions, then the EU has been very clear that they would take legal action against these companies for breaking the sanctions that are in place. But it's unclear if that would actually stop EU buyers in the end, because the prospect of facing a sanctions violation or the prospect of losing access to natural gas and causing these huge economic disruptions, it's unclear which of those is really going to win out for a lot of European countries.
Chelsey, it's seen natural gas prices skyrocket even further. Industrial firms all across the EU say they're reaching breaking point. What have you been hearing from industry?
So natural gas is crucial for a lot of different economic purposes here. About a third of it, in Germany in particular, goes to households, which will be somewhat insulated against these latest threats because we've moved out of the heating season. It's warmer weather here, so people aren't relying so much on heating. But for industrial customers, for the industrial base here in Europe, it would be very difficult if we saw prices go even further than they already have, because natural gas is so important, not just for heating and cooling your factory, but also for some very particular purposes. For example, in the fertilizer industry, natural gas is a key component to making fertilizer. And so that means that a lot of companies, a lot of fertilizer makers are already seeing prices skyrocket. They're having to raise their prices and they're having to cut production, which is adding to these food insecurity problems that have already been exacerbated by the war because of Russia and Ukraine's position as major grain suppliers. So that's one area where we're seeing ripple effects. Others include in the chemicals industry. For example, BASF is the biggest chemicals company in the world. They're based here in Germany. They say they've had to cut production, they've had to raise prices, and so far they've been able to do that. But they do say if we do see Russia cut off natural gas, that they would have to stop production, and that would have widespread impacts on the broader economy, because chemicals are the building block of pretty much everything these days. So plastics, or this foam that goes into a steering wheel for a Volkswagen vehicle, all of that would be disrupted as well. We've seen aluminum companies, steel companies, glass makers, all of these companies are warning that they are already struggling to continue production with the prices at the level they're at now. If Russia cuts off gas supplies to Europe, then we would likely start to see larger scale production outages that would impact all of our lives.
Yeah, the ripple effects are huge. Chelsey Dulaney reporting from Berlin. Back home again, the cost of living